everybody. My name is Sarah and I'm a holistic therapist and a third grade druid from the Worthing area. And I'm also a Reiki teaching master. I've been teaching Reiki now for about 11 years and practicing for about 15 years. So Oceanic Reiki, what is it? Well, about 16 years ago, I read an article in a magazine called Kindred Spirit. I don't know if you know it. And it was talking about how the Hawaiians used seashells in their holistic therapies. Of course, there was only pictures of seashells. The internet wasn't really well known, not by me then anyway. So I pondered this for a long time because I was brought up in Bermuda swimming on coral reefs. We used to eat these, for example. I had probably about 40 of them stacked up in our back garden. And we used to, unfortunately, in the 70s, we were cutting corals because we didn't know the damage we were doing. But I still had a lot of these things at home. So I was intrigued about seashell therapies. Fast forward now to about 3 years ago, and I was sitting meditating, and I was not very far from this beautiful Californian abalone shell, and I could feel something on my face, and it felt like one of those sun lamps that people use in the winter. I'm a Tai Chi practitioner, so I can feel Chi as well from different things. So I thought, maybe that's what these Hawaiians were using, but actually it wasn't when I looked into it. What the Hawaiians were using, I later found on YouTube, were these cowrie shells that we all had in our bathrooms in the 70s. A lot bigger then than now. Unfortunately, they're farmed too quickly. And this lady on YouTube was pulling pain out of a client. And at the end of it, she was talking about how the shell was a lot heavier. So I called all my friends and asked them to be my victims, as I call them. Darren here came. Nick, who's filming at the back, he's also been a recipient. And over the next year or two, all my friends came round and we just tried things and practiced things. And people were becoming really enamoured with this. I don't know anyone so far who's tried it who hasn't enjoyed it. Even though they're all falling asleep on the table. I put ocean music on and they're all snoring half the way through the visualization. But we're getting good results. They're sleeping better at night. They're relaxing a lot more. They have less anxiety than they did have. And things like cuts are healing very quickly by just running the shell through the auric field. We're not actually placing them on, really. We're running them through the auric field. And a shell with this iridescent quality, we're finding are helping people with their arthritis. We're also finding skin conditions are becoming a lot better, and people can really feel them. So we decided we would try and incorporate this into Reiki, but obviously symbols and Reiki, you don't just create something, you have to be gifted it. So how was I going to do this? Well, I'm a druid, so we do spell work sometimes. Not very often, but I got some driftwood. I attached a shell, 2 shells. These ones have come from a beach in Mozambique where I used to go travelling quite a long time ago. And I've tied a bit of leather to it. If you have time, you can get one of those wood pyro, I'm not sure what they're called, the burning tools, and write your affirmation or whatever you want in it. I just got a felt tip pen And I went down to Worthing Beach in a howling gale on a full moon in my sign, which is Pisces. And I stood there and I wished from my solar plexus for some direction, really. I had no idea how we were going to bring this out to the public. So I just literally asked the sea gods, threw it in as the tide turns. As it hit the water, symbols started being downloaded, I guess the phrase would be, into my mind. And I had to run home, repeating these symbols. I already knew some of them because I'm a Reiki master. And I sat down to type and I looked up, that was 12 o'clock lunchtime. I next looked up, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And the Oceanic Reiki courses had been born. But we didn't know how all of it was going to work. We were downloaded first the Reiki 1 attunement. And then 6 months later, I was walking my dog, not even anywhere near the beach, randomly listening to my podcast. And then suddenly the second shell was shown to me and the attunement. So of course I literally turned around, went back home and started typing again. So we haven't got the master's attunement yet, but they've told us the shell. And I guess it's going to keep coming every 6 months. So a very new therapy and seems to be getting good results. So I've brought along lots of various shells here. This is the main one we're using in the Reiki. You probably have smaller ones of these in your bathrooms. There are over 110, I believe, different types, including the New Zealand pua shell. Now the Maoris eat these, obviously, and they also cut the eyes out. Totem poles is not the correct phrase, but I don't know how else to call it. And they put the eyes on their warriors' statues to make them look fierce. We've found this shell seems to be working well at the heart, and it works, abalones work on a vortex energy, so they're on a backward spiral, anti-clockwise. If any of you are pagans and druids, you probably know that a vortex energy is incredibly healing. Widdershins, they would have called it. And then we simply change the intent to put the iridescent light back in, and that is what is repairing these cuts and these burns and things. So you have one shell here with 2 intents, a cleansing energy and then a repairing energy. I've also used this as a shield when I do house cleansings and exorcisms, and it's working quite well. The amount of holes, this has 4 holes, so we feel that this works at the heart chakra. One with 8 holes. I haven't got it here, it's a blue one, very similar to this, would possibly work at the soul star chakra above your head, and people are repairing the karma from past lives with them. I've found 2 other seashell healers on the internet, and we are all using the shells in completely different ways. One of them is reading with them. She's created a deck of cards. I haven't got them here, they're in the other room. And she is doing contramancy readings. So all of these different shells and corals have different meanings. There is another lady in Arkansas who calls herself a seashell shaman. She is working with the spirals of shells. For instance, this comes from South Africa. It's called a turbo shell. The spiral looks like a galaxy. It's clockwise, and when people are holding this at their solar plexus, it's energizing them. Comes in many different colors as well. There are silver ones, there are green ones, so you could bring the color in for color therapy as well. There is a psychologist in Hawaii who just offers people a basket of shells while they're talking. If they pick up a clam, then he associates that with they are having problems opening up and talking to people. Mitre shells. If someone were to pick a mitre shell, he would think that they probably are struggling with their religion or their spirituality. So some of them are a play on words. Other shells are used in places like India as votive shells. I have a whelk, which we have on our beaches, which is carved, and this has come from Tibet. And this would just be a little amulet to put in the pocket and fiddle with, you know, say your devotions perhaps. And these have come from Sri Lanka. This is Vishnu, and this is his consort Lakshmi. Lakshmi was born from a shell like Aphrodite. And they would have these in their homes, and they would offer them milk, flowers, sweetmeats perhaps. So these can be used as representatives. And then we have the big Shankar shells. This has come from Nepal. I think these are made for the tourists. I hope it's not whipped out of a temple, but they actually blow this, and it's supposed to make the sound of the universe, the Om symbol. I'll have a go. I'm not very good. It's a good way to clear the beach if you want a space, I think. But it's a bit of a trumpet action, so I might... And they would sound that across the valleys to call the people to prayer. So in history and prehistory, Poseidon was said to do the same thing with a king triton shell. I can't remember if this is a Pacific triton or an Atlantic triton, but there are both. Now the cowrie shells, as I said, these pull pain out of people, and I have a recipient, a lady here who is going to be a willing victim. Would you like to come up? I can't remember your name. Betty. And Betty told me earlier she has slight issues with her knees. Yeah. So I'm going to use the abalone first to take the negative entity out. I'm going to have a go on 2 different knees. So I'm going to use the cowrie shell on one. I'll do that in a minute. So I'm actually still sending Reiki from a hand, and I'm also using the shell. So do you know how to ground? I'll ground and I'll protect you myself, but if you do the same. And I should say that if I would not be using this anywhere near the heart if someone has a dodgy ticker, because I don't know what it can do. I also would not be using it on the base and sacral areas if people are pregnant or if they have prolapses, because I don't want to irritate it even more. Okay? Okay, so we make connection. And then I'm going to come in quite close, but you find that the shell finds its own area. Okay. Okay, so just give your pain to the shell. Okay. Can you feel that? Okay. So it's wanting me to stay here. Okay. And you may be able to feel 2 different energies, one from my hand and one from this shell. But don't worry if you can't. So we're really running the shells through the auric fields. Sometimes I also ask them to choose a shell to hold as well whilst they're sitting there. I forgot that, sorry.
Do you want me to do that?
No, that's okay. Well, if you can reach one that you see. The corals I tend to put underneath people for grounding, and they are very good for bone structure as well, apparently. But I do also put these abalones on people's joints. I had a marathon runner who came to me after the Brighton Marathon, and we just put the shells on all of his joints, and the next day he said he was fine. So, but it's all so new, this, that we just want to get it out there for people to start using themselves. Because people use crystals with their healing. Some people even use trees with their healing, with the Ogham. So why not these? They're in the sea, they're beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. And the Hawaiians have been using them for years. They also scoop things out of the aura with them. So you may be able to feel that. That there. Okay, so how they would use a cowrie, which is actually a fertility shell. A lot of the Africans have them around their belts, the small ones with the gold band. They were used as currency, and they're also used to pull chi out. So I'll make the connection again. Give the pain to the shell. And you could try this with any shell with a cavity. We've tried it on Chris, the gentleman running this show, with a murex shell on his knee injury. And he had about 48 hours free from pain. So, okay. Oh, I'm getting quite a lot out of there. Can you feel that? Yeah. Right, okay. We've also had people coming to meditation evenings with their husbands who really just come along. They're not interested in it. And he actually could feel this on his arm injury, and he was amazed. He'd never felt chi before. He didn't even really believe in it before. And he came round the next day and bought two, and he's getting along with his arm injury. He's a gardener. So I'm still using the principles of Reiki. After I've pulled something out, I will always put it back in with blue light and seal it with gold, as we are taught. Is it the back of your knees as well?
Yeah, I ache everywhere.
Okay. Okay, so I'll pull out of the back and going down your calf as well, I think. Okay. And amazingly enough, after we've pulled out, I mean, I would probably be working around these knees probably for about 20 minutes, if that's your problem area. The shells are heavier, and it's absolutely mind-boggling that chi can do this. And going up your thighs as well, isn't it? Okay. So that's coming quite a far out from you. So that is in the, probably the mental field as well. Okay. Do you find it's mind over matter with pain? It's really difficult to do though, isn't it? Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to take that off you for a second. And I'm going to get you to hold this pair.
Okay.
And you'll notice the one I used on you is heavier.
So is this the one you
That's the one I use. It's heavier.
Yes.
So how do I clean them? Right, we've got to get rid of all that negative chi. I'm going to get you to hold this and feel the sun lamp. So how do we clean them? Because we can't use them on anyone else afterwards. I get smoke. A joss stick, Santo Palo or whatever it's called, anything, and I literally smoke the chi out. If you have an amethyst bed, you can put them on your amethyst bed. I doubt you'll have one of these because it's probably illegal to have them now because this is so old. This works in the same way, it cleanses. And for the shells like the abalone that we used here, I have made a spritz up. This one in particular is star anise and lang lang. And I literally spray it. I wipe it off, or you can leave it. Or if you're attuned to Reiki and you know the Seihei Ki, yeah, the Seihei Ki symbol is working too. And we've found with these abalones that they don't need recharging. They're recharging themselves. You can even put your jewellery in. Lots of people put jewellery in them. You're cleansing your jewellery. Whether you realised it or not, your guides have told you to do that, and that is happening. Can you feel that working?
Yeah, I'll just...
Quite interesting.
The thing I can feel is spirits here because my eye's going.
I can pass some of these abalones around. I'll pass a few around and you can have a feel. There you go. So I haven't got many with me. They're all in the other room. Now these creatures are sentient beings. I've been reading a lot by marine biologists. This is called a helmet conch, a bull helmet conch. It comes from Nigeria, the coast of Africa. And a marine biologist was on the way to collect his bits and bobs for the day, and he saw 3 in a triangle about 3 meters away. One of them was this way up, so it would have been totally exposed and eaten. As he went back a few hours later, he noticed the other 2 had moved in closer. Then on his way back again a 3rd time, he noticed, I'm going to use other shells because I haven't got many of these. He noticed that they were getting their foot and they were clearing the sand away, and another one was pushing it over so that it didn't die. So you're not telling me that that is not a sentient being somehow. They somehow knew that their friend, colleague, whatever, family member was in trouble and they went and rescued it. So if you're druidic or pagan, you could bring animist qualities into these. Now mollusks are very different. The only thing they have in common is a foot and a reproductive system. Every other thing about them is incredibly different. So one of the ladies does study all their behaviour. So that's a little bit of interesting information about the conch. Now, we did have corals in this country. This is called a star coral. It's found mainly in tropical waters. But I found a polished, crystallised fossil of the same coral in Avebury, in the hen shop in Avebury. And this was flooded in Wiltshire 60 million years ago. I have a small bit here that somebody has given me from Thailand, and they feel the same somehow. They're the same, you know, the same energy and the same weight. This is from today, 60 million years ago. The whole of the planet was water once. We have all come from the water. So why don't we just go back to it to get our healing? When our babies are in the womb, they go through a fish stage. Now, I know this because my daughter was born with a hole in her throat. And the very elderly doctor came out and said, we were fish, you know, and you go through that stage in the womb and her gill didn't close down. This is called a brain coral. And I think the coral got its own back on my father, who cut this and then got dementia. Who knows? Oops. Well, I am a water person after all. And then sea fans. I dived down and got this when I was about 8. I had to take one of my armbands off when my mother nipped off to the loo, because I could see it, but I couldn't get down there. But in the 70s, people have these all over, you know, huge fireplaces with these. So it isn't any wonder that now our reefs need protecting. But on Worthing Beach, you can find things. Who's got a lucky stone? Who knows what lucky stones are? There was a thriving business of these happening. It's a sea urchin. But there was a thriving business in medieval times and Tudor times in lucky stones. Boys and kids would hunt for them on the pebbly beaches, and if they found one, they would sell it on as a talisman. So if you turn things over and find them, that's what I did in a rock pool. This one has come from Swanage. It's a limpet. So I would use this again in a bit of sympathetic magic. We would put these over chakras and somehow siphon off the chi. You could also use it in a cupping like the acupuncturist. Are you feeling that?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because when I do healing or anything, it's heat, but that's cold.
That's cold to you, is it? That's a water energy. I must admit, the people that had the attunement, some of them blubbed for a week. It was a very cleansing, water-based attunement. So that's another bit of sympathetic magic. You could put that over your chakras or over pain points. I found a sea urchin on Worthing Beach, a complete sea urchin. I was amazed that it hadn't been broken. And then we have these whelks, which stand for spirituality. If you did a conchomancy reading and somebody picked up that, that's what I would say. You're working on your spirituality. And then, of course, we have these stones which are burrowed by an animal. But people can see the fairy through them. Hold it up and you see the fae. It's a play on words. They used to use them for glasses in the old days when their eyesight went. But it is said that in the places betwixt places you can see the fae, and the beach, the shoreline is a liminal space. And a slipper shell, the good old Atlantic slipper shell. How many times have our kids brought handfuls of those home? You quite often see them in chains living on top of each other, up to about 10. Now the bottom one would be a female and above would all be male. When the female died, the next one on the bottom would change its sex and become a female. And then, yeah, very bizarre. So we perhaps don't have such flamboyant shells or such large shells, but our shells there's still something special about them. And I've found bits and bobs on the beach that I know have come from the Windies up on the Gulf Stream. I've found chittens, which we used to prize off rocks when we were kids in Bermuda. And I found one on Worthing Beach. Now, I was supposed to do a visualization, and I'm so sorry I've run out of time because I do waffling on a bit. So if anyone has any questions, I have a stall in the healing area. I do have some to sell as well. And thank you ever so much. And I hope I've inspired you to go home and get those shells out of your bathroom and to throw the soap away and start to use them. Thank you. Thank you.